Good afternoon, everybody. In its most literal form, chess is war. Two armies of similar strength engaged in a pitched battle across the checkered field. But chess is so much more than that. It is about playing by the rules. It is about patience. It's about endurance. It's about knowing your limitations and understanding the virtue of sacrifice. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us the finest exponent of chess, a person who started as a boy wonder, went on to become a five-time world champion, and then a living legend. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's give a standing ovation to one of the greatest chess players in the history of the world, Vishwanathan Anand. Welcome to the Conclave, Anand.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. It's been such a long, interesting journey. So let's start right at the beginning. We first heard of Vishwanathan Anand through the fuzzy pages of a newspaper when there was no 24-hour television. It was the early 80s. And suddenly there was this person who was creating ripples in different corners of the country. How did you start playing chess, and how did you become so good at such a young age? What was that one spark that sort of egged you on to achieve so much so fast?
I started playing when I was 6, and my mother taught me how to play. Basically, my elder brother and sister were playing, so being the youngest, you also want to join in and so on. And then I joined a chess club, and the idea was simply to keep playing very often. I was very enthusiastic. I would go every Monday evening, every Thursday evening, and every Sunday evening, and those were the only club hours. So I was there whenever they were open. And we would play 5-minute games. That is, each player got 5 minutes for the whole game. So each game would take 10 minutes. And the winner would stay. The loser would get up and get back in the queue. So we're talking about 10, 12 people.
So if you lost a game... Did you keep sitting at the table for hours together?
I eventually got good enough to sit for longer and longer stretches. Obviously, I had a very big incentive to win, which meant that you learn to maximize your resources. I mean, even if your game was going badly, every trick you could pull and conjure up to tilt the game. So it made you a very strong practical player.
How old were you when you started thinking of terms like maximizing your resources, planning your moves? Did it start happening when you were 7, 8 years old? I mean, a lot of us don't even know this stuff till we're about to leave school and enter college.
No, that's the way I would look back on it now. But of course, then I simply thought, well, let me try one more trick and that's it. So the language would have been very different if you had asked me then. But essentially, that was what I was doing.
There's a very interesting story, ladies and gentlemen. In 1983, there was a chess tournament happening in Mumbai, when suddenly a buzz went around the hall that the clock of one of the players has gotten spoiled. Now, in a game like chess, which relies heavily on how much time you have left, it was, seen as a big problem. So they went and they checked the clocks, and they realized that one player had taken about 1 minute to make as many moves as the other player had made in 1 hour. The clock was checked, the clock was fine, and once the clock was fine, they said, "Who's this person?" And it was Vishwanathan Anand. Do you remember that incident?
Yes, it happened several times when I was young. Because then I was very... if I saw a good move, it was obvious to me it was the best, I would just make it. And again, if my move was reasonably good enough, then the odds were quite favorable, because the chances are my opponent may not find the best response, and then I would get away with something. Later on in my life, I learned how to think a bit more. You have to force yourself to think a bit deeper. But my first guess still is very good. The first reaction I have in a position is a reasonable guess, and it's correct quite often. So when I was young, obviously percentages worked quite well for me.
So do you now fight the instinct, the first instinct that you get, or do you just take like a moment to say that I mean, does overthinking complicate things then if your first guess is always right?
Yes, it can. Over the years, I've accumulated enough examples of both, where I can tell you, in a recent tournament I played in Zurich, whenever I thought It worked out brilliantly. I would, even if after I saw the variation, I would sit for, I would just say, well, I've got so much time, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here. And at the end, I would suddenly see something that I missed before, and I could fine-tune it. But sometimes it's led me astray as well, so it's not always been one way. And in a sense, it's an acquired habit. I've learned to fight my instinct, which is to do the first thing that comes to my mind. But with experience, you get better at it, which means that it works more often than it doesn't.
Anand went on to become a grandmaster in 1987. He was just 18. And then after a couple of years after that, he'd become so famous, everybody across India knew who Vishwanathan Anand was. There was a very funny incident on a train that you've spoken about many years ago, which would be great if you could just recall it.
Sure. Well, I'd become a grandmaster, and many possibilities had opened up for me. I was the first World Junior Champion out of Asia, and the best Indian player. So I had the possibility to play in a lot of tournaments, and I was enjoying myself. But once I was traveling in a train in India, and well, this was back in the days when everybody would sit with their own phone and just keep scrolling. So we actually had a conversation. Nice old man, he asked me what I did. And I told him I was a chess player. Probably not in his top 3 answers that he expected. So he then asked me again, yes, but what do you do? And I told him, no, I'm a chess player. I'm actually doing that full time. And then he said, but do you plan to go back to college? Do you plan to get a job? You know, various versions of the same thing. And I told him, no, I'm planning to make a living. Because, like I said, I was very excited at that point of the possibilities I had in chess. And I must have seemed very enthusiastic or naive in his eyes. Then at the end he said, well, young man, just keep in mind, sports is a very unpredictable career. If you were Vishwanathan Anand, you could probably make a living playing chess. But otherwise, I wouldn't rush into it, which I thought was nice. So anyway, I didn't tell him.
Did you tell him?
No, I didn't tell him.
So he still thinks that he gave some excellent advice to a young man and set the course of his life on the right path.
I hope so.
Anand, one thing that stands out about your game, and everybody's spoken about it, when you started out and, during 2000 to 2010 especially, which, a lot of people in the chess world define as the era of Anand, that you're extremely aggressive on the chessboard. I mean, you come up with the most daring gambits, the most dangerous moves. In real life, however, you don't seem aggressive at all. You seem gentle, genial, calm. Mm-hmm. So, are you two different personalities when you're on the board or in real life, or is there an aggression bubbling inside that you've learned how to harness and use on the chessboard?
Yes, it's true that my style in chess is fairly aggressive, it's dynamic, it's active. I don't like sitting and playing passive positions, but I like to be doing something at the chessboard. To explain that, I would say that in a position where you don't have much of a plan, I'm not very good at just sitting around, but I like to conjure up some kind of plan and follow it. By plan, I simply mean this is where I want my pieces to be in a few moves, that sort of thing, or this is the position I'm aiming for. So in chess, I lean towards being aggressive. In many areas of life, I would say I'm quite similar. I'm impulsive, and that's how my chess is. So I want to take a quick decision in many things, and I don't mind running a certain amount of risk. It's just I've learned over the years that I'm not as good as I am at chess in these other areas. So I've learned to tone it down a bit. But even in chess, it's not personal aggression. It's just I like the pieces to move, and that's what it is.
That whole period from 2000 to 2010 when you won your first championship and then you won your second world championship and third and fourth and fifth and all this talk started about, let's give Anand the Bharat Ratna, let's, celebrate him. You somehow still remained very distant from, you remained on the periphery of our consciousness in some ways because A, you were living abroad for most of that period. And second, while you were associated with a couple of companies, you didn't really try to sell yourself or market yourself like we're used to our cricketers doing these days. I mean, they're in our face all the time. They're endorsing any brand they can lay their hands on. Why did you choose to do that? Were you concentrating too much on your game, or did these things didn't matter to you?
Not at all. It's something I think that it's very nice when what you do in your sport opens other doors, and I was happy to take up as much of it as possible. So, for instance, I've had, well, it's getting close to 16-year relationship with NIIT. And we've done some very interesting things together. One of the things we started 13 years back was the Mind Champions Academy, which we put into many, many schools. Besides that, I have done, endorsements for other companies and things like that. But always with the restriction that before a tournament, I like to block a few days on either side just to try and get into a situation where your head is thinking about chess, let's say, at least 90% of the time. And that's very difficult when you're distracted. So with NIIT, and for instance, with NIIT Mind Champions Academy, I arrange my school visits to promote the game because of the game's obvious benefits to students. I time these visits with lean periods in chess. And so I try to work my calendar like that. But I have to remember that it might be fun extending yourself 1 year, but if that means your chess suffers, then how does that help? The second thing, like you said, I'm traveling a lot. And a lot of the tournaments don't happen in India, which also cuts into the time. So it's not that I was unenthusiastic about it in any way. I took the chances I could, but there were certain limitations I felt I had to work under.
Anand, a lot of people always wonder what chess is really a function of. You know, is a person who plays better chess than you necessarily more intelligent than you? Does it mean he has a better memory than you? Does it mean he has a better instinct than you? Can he process information better? What is it that makes chess, that makes a good chess player? What would you say is the primary thing that is needed to do that in terms of what does the mind require?
All of those things are plausible. So if you have an outstanding memory, or you have the ability to concentrate, or you have a great ability to visualize, or you're generally very intelligent, the chances are you might be good at chess. But still, it has to be said, getting good at chess is a question of getting good at chess. So so someone who's playing chess occasionally will find that it's useful mind training for other things. But a professional chess player is another ball game. I mean, then you're talking about spending, 30 or 40 hours a week playing chess, practicing chess, maybe even more. Then the level of commitment is much higher. And so if someone is a very good chess player, chances are he's just practiced more than me, or vice versa. And so we have to distinguish between these two things. I mean, you spend that much time on chess, you'll get very, very good at chess. There will be some improvement in other areas, but if you want to get better at maths, well, do maths. So,
have you ever sat back and thought how many chess boards, how many games, how many terabytes of information about chess you have stored inside your brain?
There's obviously a lot there, and many times it's funny, I will recall stuff during a game that I didn't recall for a very long time. But suddenly at the board, I'll remember some old instance which I saw, some pattern which I saw, and things will become clear to me immediately. So, but it's very hard to quantify. I mean, I have databases of something like 12 million games, which I have to recall. Obviously, I only try to recall what is necessary for me.
So how do you draw that information? I mean, it's one thing having it there, but there's another thing accessing it just when you require it. How do you train your mind to do that? How do you see a position and you say that I've seen this before?
Okay, the first thing you learn in chess is when you lose a game, when you have this pain of defeat, it helps you remember something. There are games I've lost when I was 7 or 8, and I still won't make that blunder again because just when I'm about to make it, I'll remember that guy's face or something. So the first thing is pain of defeat, emotional. Some things are either painful or happy, but you'll remember them all your life, and at least generally you will avoid them unless they come in a new form. The second thing is to remember stories. If you remember a key idea or a pattern, because of a story, then you associate the story with that. And these are normal memory techniques. I mean, you'll often find people remember something if it's associated with a certain color or a certain context. You know, it's a similar pattern. But in the end, it's about seeing the stuff over and over in regular intervals. If I see something today, then I see it day after, then I see it 5 days from now, I'll recall it pretty well. So it's about reinforcement.
Can we then give you a little bit of a test?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to show Anand the chessboard, and I'm going to ask him if he can identify which game it is. Yeah, should I put it up on the... It's going to come up on the board behind you, and on the left, that one, yeah. And there's one there as well, if you can see all the pieces better.
Yes, okay, so this one is one of my favorites, in the sense of, I have made this move, the move that was just made.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, this move that was just made, if you just execute the move,
Yeah.
this was Spassky against Petrosian.
That is correct.
And
Sorry.
so this rook move, where normally a rook is weaker than a bishop or a knight. So by making that move, making that move is in fact a sacrifice. You're giving up something more valuable for something less valuable. But in this special case, it helps black improve his pawn structure, and that's why I remember it. It's an idea I've used myself dozens of times, so it clearly made a big impact on me. And that essential pattern, those two pawns and the rook in the middle, is all I need to remember, that it's Spassky-Petrosian.
Okay. What about this then?
This one I remember is Petrosian-Botvinnik.
That's great. Okay, can you tell me which year it was?
63, India match. Not this one.
No, this one, sorry.
No, this is another one. Okay, if you go to the next one.
Yeah.
This is Petrosian-Botvinnik. Here the thing is that the white knight is sitting on a central square where it can't be touched.
Yeah.
If you just hold the position for a second.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. This knight is sitting in a central square where black cannot attack it with a knight. And that is how I remember this game. It was always taught to us in a way that, you see, this knight cannot be attacked by a pawn, therefore it feels so invulnerable, it just sits there the whole game. Which is in fact what happened in that game, and which is how I recall it.
That's incredible. To better demonstrate Anand's skills, we'd also asked him to send us some data that would help us understand how his mind works when he sees a particular position on the board and then applies a game that he'd seen in the past and sort of applies that information to play his game. So Anand, would you like to give us a little bit of a demonstration of that? I have it saved here. I'm ready. Can we put it up on the board, please? Yeah, there it is.
Yes. Okay. This I remember very, very well indeed. This is Alekhine against Hervé in 1937 in their second match. And I can mention one thing. There is essential detail in this position and everything else. So you could tell me that the black bishop...
Would you like to use a laser to just explain that better? You just need to press.
Yeah. So that bishop, if it happened to be on that square, I would still remember the position. If that pawn happened to be a square back, I would still remember the position. The essential feature of this position is that queen, that knight, that queen, and the king. So now if we make the move, so what white has done, queen h8 check, is a queen sacrifice.
Should I just show it once again?
Yeah.
The queen is moving.
So the queen goes up the board giving check. Black is forced to capture it. And then white takes the pawn in the middle And this is the point of the combination. It attacks the king and the queen. So that theme helps me remember the names of the participants, the date, the venue, and it's a story because it happened in the 1937 World Championship match. And so blowing a big chance like this must have been a disappointment. But here's the beauty. This story is famous not because Alekhine made the move, but because he didn't. He didn't see the idea. Now, if we go to our next game, yes. This is Petrosian-Spassky, again from a World Championship match. And I'll tell you the essential idea. The pieces are in different squares, but you'll see the essential pattern quickly. The white queen, the black queen, the rook, and the king. So the move which Petrosian made instantly was queen to h8 check. King captures the queen, and then the knight captures. And so the knight now again attacks the queen and the king. In the earlier game I showed you, that queen was there, but essentially it's a story of a knight attacking a king and queen at the same time. Petrosian found this, and in fact he played queen h8 and he resigned, and Spassky resigned. And this shows how chess players acquire knowledge and why we study past games. Because patterns like this are invaluable. If you don't know that the idea exists, there's a good chance you'll miss it. But if you know the idea exists, immediately you'll see the pattern. I mean, the moment I see that queen and rook where they were, bells should start ringing. And that's the idea of studying past games. So you can see that a pattern repeats itself. I'll now take you to one more game. This is my game against Peter Leko from 2008. So you can see the time scale, 1937, 1966, 2008. And what did I do instantly? I played queen h8 check. Here it's identical. The knight is in the same square, the king is in the same square, the rook is in the same square, and the queen is in the same square. Sorry. If black captures the queen, which he's forced to do, then white captures the rook, and the same idea again. The knight attacks the queen and the king at the same time and wins. Here, what is essential is only these four pieces. Like I said, you could show me the position with some other feature on the queen side. You could move that pawn one square back and that pawn one square back, and I wouldn't know it. But the essential information helps me tell you when, where, who, and helps me find the idea. So very often when I see a position, I can see what I should do instantly because we study past games.
Anand, how much has the emergence of computers and all these things being available to you instantly, constantly, all the time, changed your sport over the last 20, 25 years? I mean, it's night and day. Computers have brought this forward so much that, for instance, when I was growing up, in order to acquire the experience, people used to say, well, he needs about 7 or 8 years of experience and then he's ready to challenge for this or try for that. Now, you think 6 months. Because computers they collect all the information and they present it to you instantly. And if you have any doubts, you don't need to discuss it with another strong player. You can just ask the computer, because very often the computer itself will give you the answer. And in the event you need to talk to another player, you do it online. You do it on Skype or with a phone. Whereas there are years I remember where I had to write down the stuff I wanted to ask someone and wait for the next time we happened to be in the same city together. So the kind of way you can consult and ask questions and clarify your thoughts has changed so much that people get much stronger, much younger. When I became a grandmaster at the age of 18, I was the youngest grandmaster in the world. Now I would have to be 11 to be the youngest grandmaster in the world. So that age is descending fast. And in fact, chess is getting much, much younger. And one of the reasons is because of computers. The other thing computers have done is to level the geographic playing field.
Once upon a time, if you wanted to become a good chess player, it was ideal to be born in Russia. If you couldn't be born in Russia, if you had to be born in India, Chennai was a good bet, and so on. Now, it doesn't matter. You can be in some island in the Pacific. It'll still hurt, the lack of contact, because you won't make the initial friend and you won't interact. But a big part of the gap has disappeared, which is why the top 10 now is filled with players from countries which never had a top 10 player for the last 100 years. So you can see how computers are changing the game.
But are they robbing chess of the human element, or does Matchcraft still have enough of that? I mean, chess also needs to be about emotion. It needs to be about feeling. It can't only be a mathematical algorithm, because then, a very essential part of what makes sport will disappear. Do you think that's going, or do you think it's just used as a tool? Or is it slowly taking over the sport?
Not at all. There were fears expressed along these lines some years back. But the point is, as long as chess is a sport between two humans, then the human element is there. Of course, if you play a computer, then half of that, in fact, that is absent, because you can't have emotions on your own. So playing against a computer is depressing. But the point is, computers have gotten so strong that nobody plays against a computer anymore. In 1997, you needed a supercomputer to beat the strongest human on the planet. By 2000, your laptop could do it. By 2004, an old laptop could do it. Then your mobile phone couldn't do it for a while, and by the second or third iteration of these things, that started to happen. And soon, your kitchen table will do it, your fridge will do it. It's not going to be fun, because computing power is going so fast that outcalculating us is no longer a challenge for a computer. But what computers have done is to show us how rich the game is. Because there are many positions we were not able to explore because they were so complicated. So we were doing it in our own slow way, which is to play a game, see what happens, play a second game, see what happens. But computers have opened up so many things. They also close a few doors, but they open far more than they close. And at the moment, I would say chess is richer than ever before.
Anand, is computers at the heart of your recent rivalry with Magnus Carlsen that's going on? We've witnessed you play 2 world championships. You've lost to him on both occasions. And, in some sense, people say that you're the last pure champion, because you came at a time when there were no computers. You didn't have the kind of aids that they have. While Magnus Carlsen is a creature of today. He has his aids at his disposal all the time. So is this a battle between the old and the new in some sense?
Yes, there is a generational shift. Carlsen was born when the first computer, let's say the first chess database software was 5 years old. Whereas I saw this for the first time in my life when I was already World Junior Champion. But he was born 5 years into a world where database software was available, and when he was 3 years old, you could play against strong programs. So his outlook is completely different. In fact, many people say that he has a uncomputerish or anti-computerish style. And it's true, but in a sense, being anti-something is also being influenced by it. Since it's only because he can see what the computer says that he can then try to look for alternatives around it. So, and youngsters are getting much, much better with calculation. They're much more creative and imaginative because they have so many examples of unusual moves that the computer suggested that over time it's accumulated in their head. In the same way that I had to look at these classics to get interesting ideas, well, their pool of ideas is much bigger because computers are generating it at an incredible pace. So these days, like I said, chess is very, very rich, and you find very interesting new ideas coming up all the time. But you're right, there's a big generational shift there.
Chess has been a sport known for its great rivalries. You had, Fischer and Spassky, Karpov and Kasparov. Do you see Anand and Carlsen becoming the next great rivalry in chess?
It could be, but I've got to win the next candidates for that to happen. So I will play that in early 2016. The date and venue haven't been fixed yet, but I assume it'll happen at that time. And but I have to say that's a bit simplistic because clearly the field is more crowded than that. We don't have the Karpov and Kasparov essentially had the world to themselves for a few years. We don't. The field is much tighter now. But it could be. I mean, I could play a match with them again, but I'll have to win a candidates first for that. And so that'll be the first challenge.
I mean, after these two encounters, have you reached a point where you feel you're not going to be fully satisfied until you can master him in a head-to-head tournament?
Yes. Obviously, if someone bests you twice, it gets on your nerves. I won't pretend otherwise, but sure. I mean, I'm still motivated to try, and it's also I want to just see how far I can go, because there are so many new things happening in chess that essentially I would say that I'm still fascinated by chess, and there are things that I don't understand, and I'm curious to get to the bottom of that. And if in the process I become a better player, then well and good.
Is that what keeps you going? I mean, people have been talking for the last 3-4 years now that how long is Anand going to play for? He's in his 40s now. How long can he continue? Is this the reason why you want to keep on? Because you're still learning new things on the board?
Yes, very much. I think the problem is now because chess is getting so young as a sport that people in their 40s are seen as outliers. But I grew up in a time when someone in their 40s was expected to peak in chess. So it's a strange idea that people then automatically ask you this question. But yes, I would like to play, and in a way it's challenging. You want to see if you can compete, and you want to do that as long as possible.
But Anand, does your game change as you grow older? I mean, when you're playing a physical sport like cricket or football, you're basically practicing every day. Everything that you do is part of an instinct. So, if the ball is here, Sachin Tendulkar is going to cut it to the boundary for 4 runs. And, it's just something that comes to him naturally. It's a function of practice over the years. In chess, which is a mind game, as your life is changing, you're a young boy, then you grow up, then you get married, then you have a child, Akhil's a young boy now. And so as you're growing older, as you're changing, does your approach to the game start changing too?
Of course. First of all, the pattern is the same with chess and other sports. You evolve, you constantly evolve, and that's true with chess. Second, there is a physical toll in chess. I mean, if you play 6 or 7 tough games, you will be exhausted halfway through the tournament. So a lot of my training goes into physical training as well. I go to the gym and I keep a regular schedule because I know that otherwise I won't be able to deal with the tension at a tournament. And that is also one reason that chess is getting younger, because the increased number of tournaments and competition means that careers are getting a bit shorter. But the rest, it's all instinct. I mean, I explained it in slow motion, and I gave a very, very simple example with the queen going to the corner square, just like Petrosian's games and Hervé's games. But that process happens instantly when I play. And I'm also doing things by reflex. I mean, normally when I see the knight, the queen, and the rook, I immediately think of that move. And like this, there are millions of patterns. I couldn't list them out for you, but when the position comes, I will see something. It might be a false pattern, it might be a real one, but nonetheless, you generally play by instinct. Or at least you think by instinct and then you double check. So, in that sense, we're not that different from other sports.
Ladies and gentlemen, Anand is also going to give us a live masterclass in chess right now. And for that, I would like to invite my colleague from Headlines Today, Managing Editor Rahul Kanwal, on the stage, please. So Anand is going to play Rahul and me simultaneously. Right now, just 10 moves. And I've requested him to be very kind to me and absolutely merciless with Rahul. And he's going to also talk us through the master moves that we make and the mistakes that we commit. If we can have a camera so that everybody can see it.
When Kunal discussed this, the first thing I did was go on Google and check what's the shortest game in the history of chess. So the shortest game in the history of chess is 3 moves, and Vishwanathan Anand has promised that we last longer than 3 moves.
he's also told us how to ensure he doesn't beat us in 3 moves. And then to come. No, why don't you just stand here so we can form like a. Can everybody see this? Yeah, we are taking white in on both boards. Can we see? Yeah, there it is. Can we put it up on this screen as well? Okay. Shall I make my first move? Okay. So since you've told us not to move the pawn next to the king, I'm going to open with this.
Yeah, that's reasonably safe. So I'll do that.
Okay. Is there some pattern starting to emerge already?
Well,
Depends on what I do next.
well, this was not considered one of the main moves for a very long time, but nowadays people play it for fun. So
Okay. Thanks for that.
generally, the first move has to be to the 4th rank.
Okay.
So because you're fighting for the center,
Yeah.
you don't want to sit too far back.
Okay. I'm going to remedy that in my next pawn move. Okay, I move the knight forward.
Yeah.
I'll go for it.
Again, this is going to pass without consequence because your I don't have a bishop pointing there yet, but knights go to the center, not to the side.
Okay.
What's the most defensive move someone can make who's desperate to last for at least 9 moves? Moving on the side is not a good idea.
No. Generally, you want to fight for the center. So this area in the center is what you want to fight for. So I'll go for that.
Okay. So now you've blocked my second pawn from going forward. I'm going to move this one here.
Okay. That loses a pawn. Because you're
Straight
walking
away.
into the path of the bishop, but I'm not going to take it yet. So I'm going to go there.
Okay. Let me. Okay. Let me try and save it here so that you don't take my knight straight away.
Yeah.
But. Okay. Can you see the board, please?
Yeah, we probably need bigger pieces, I guess. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm afraid you walked into mate. So.
See, 6 moves and I'm gone.
You lost, Kunal?
Yes.
I lasted longer than
You haven't played yet.
Oh, I haven't played. I've played some moves.
Yeah, so it's also mate, yeah.
So that's two checkmates, ladies and gentlemen, in about 5 moves, and we didn't know what was going on.
So okay, basically these two, that's what you want to avoid. So you either make this move. If you do that, then you're safe. You'll never be mated in under 10 moves. That's the key move.
It was fun losing to Vishwanathan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
really
much.
a pleasure. We can
Thank you
do that
so
till
much.
We lost to the great legend.
Can we take
And
a
Kunal and I can squabble over who lost sooner or
fastest?
later.
No, we're going to go over the clip and see who made less moves later. Can we have a couple of questions before we wind up this session, please? Gentleman right here. Can somebody give him a mic, please?
Thank you. Vishwanathan, you mentioned that you normally play 30 hours of practice every week. Now, if you play with inferior players, you will not improve. You need players of your level. So how do you find them? If you play with me, you will not improve, I can guarantee you that, though I consider myself a good player. Now, you mentioned about computers. I remember reading 20 years ago, you defeated a computer. But now the computers have improved, so would they now beat you most of the times?
Yes, I think almost any phone which was made in the last 3 years can beat any human on the planet. it's gotten to that point because of the growth of computers and the growth of very sophisticated chess playing programs. I mean, chess playing programs are very sophisticated these days. In a sense, they also make very unusual moves. They don't just use brute force, and they're not very materialistic and that sort of thing. But the second thing is that to improve, all you need is a partner who has ideas. Because earlier, you had to be very good because you had to defend your ideas yourself. So if I said, okay, this move is good, and you said, no, but I think this move is better, it ended up being my opinion versus yours. What happens now is that both of us can then check with the computer and see. So when we work, I can have someone whose practical results aren't as good as mine, but who has very creative ideas. That's enough. Because the fact-checking can be left to the computers. And so you get on with finding creative ideas and interesting patterns that you can use. And that's what you try to do all the time. You try to find interesting patterns that you can use later.
Another question? Yeah, right there, please.
Yeah, hello, Alan. Like you talked that now kids are becoming creative by working with the computers. Is it a good idea to I have a 4-year-old kid, to let those kids play with computers? Because when they play with humans, they're very unpredictable when they go to tournaments and all. So should they practice with computers?
Before you answer, she's been Skyping, and your son is in Meerut, right? So she's been showing this entire session to her son on Skype. So he's listening to you. He's 4 years old. He's the youngest rated chess player in the world.
Wow, okay.
And she's been showing the entire session to him on Skype, and she's been holding that phone up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think a certain amount of interaction with the computer is helpful. And there are obviously nice videos and chess puzzles that you can access to the computer. You can watch online tournaments. So a lot of learning opportunities. However, before you're able to use the computer fully as an oracle, you must first be able to understand the answers. So I think it's very healthy to have a back and forth, that you play with other people, even that you interact with people who are stronger than you, so that you get certain questions in your mind. And once you have the question in your head, then you can ask the computer and try and get an answer. But otherwise, if you just expose to the computer too quickly, you might not be able to, the question might not be clear in your head, and neither will the answer. So I would say it's one tool amongst many, but it shouldn't be the only thing they do.
Okay, one last question. Sorry, we're running out of time. Somebody from this side, yes? Damayanti, do you have a question? Yeah. Oh, we'll take both of them quickly.
Thanks. You know, this chessboard is all about power play. Kings, queens, enemies, and wars. And the skills you mentioned are like strategy, guessing the opponent's intentions, and other things. So wouldn't that make chess players great politicians? Have you ever thought about that?
Yes. Actually, I don't. I think chess and politics are very different. Probably, if you see that my pieces will do exactly what I tell them to do, and my opponent's pieces will do exactly what my opponents tell them to do, then the normal analogy is more with armies. So you could make a case, and in fact, historically that was the case, that chess was considered a way for you to think strategically. And in fact, the chess pieces are the old army units. Because we don't have tanks and all that, but the old army units, the cavalry, infantry, all that, that's represented here. We can't change rules in mid-course. We can't break away and start a new game. So for politics, not ideal.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
From
Hi, Anand.
Hi.
We were all heartbroken when you lost twice to Magnus Carlsen. Just wanted to know, have you been able to find out, what was, or you and your team, what was the reason behind it, and you've been preparing for that? Just wanted to know that, so that next time, you emerge as a winner. Thank you.
Actually, in our case, the pattern has been fairly clear for a while. I mean, the first match, I was simply not in the right frame of mind. Not only for that match, but for a while before that, I'd been, and I think that had a lot to do with not being on top of things and not focusing on the right areas to work on for many years. For the second match, things improved a lot, and I think I managed to cover the gap very well. But still, I've got to get better with the precision. So essentially, Magnus's style is about making a lot of moves. They're not always the best move. In fact, far from it. But his moves hardly ever fall out of the top 4. So there's a kind of consistency there. And changing my game to be more consistent is one of the things I would have to do. But that's easier said than done, because it's easier to work on specific tasks than simply say, to say I'm going to be better for a longer period is a very vague goal, and it's hard to implement. You have to try and just raise your game at a lot of different levels. For instance, the way you play your opening is very different from the way you play a later stage. So it's not the same approach. But again, I think if I keep working consistently, then I'll get better at it, and hopefully, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vishwanathan Anand. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause to Vishwanathan Anand for everything that he's achieved and much more to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. Thank you, Kunal. May I please ask Pankaj Agarwal, Chancellor Ram Swaroop University, to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to Mr. Vishwanathan Anand. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please have a round of applause? Thank you, Kunal. Thank you, Mr. Anand. Thank you, Mr. Swaroop.